Santiago Valdez was the architect of his own golden island in Pacific Palisades, where the ocean murmured promises of success and silence, but never of peace. His day invariably began with the aroma of an imported espresso and the cold rush of $1 million agenda weighing on his soul. He was used to the predictability of luxury, polished cars, security gates, and, unfortunately, that constant, subtle ache in his chest. That ache was Nico, his son, and the reality that his world was defined by crutches, physical therapy, and the eternal struggle against fate. That morning, however, his routine was shattered when he arrived home early, a rare anomaly caused by a canceled flight and an inexplicable restlessness. He saw the black SUV parked in the driveway, but the bustle that usually filled the yard was gone, replaced by an almost sacred silence. His eyes, accustomed to analyzing graphs and financial statements in the blink of an eye, took an inordinate amount of time to process the scene near the fountain. There stood Nico, the small, plucky figure he knew so well, but stripped of the steel and aluminum supports that were her daily armor. Nico was standing, a sight that froze Santiago's pulse and time under the California sun that shone on the horizon. Beside him, on her knees and with a posture that radiated an almost monastic concentration, was Mina Cruz, his new companion. She wasn't holding him up. She only wrapped him in the protective shadow of her hands, ready to break the fall that seemed inevitable at any moment. The girl from East Los Angeles seemed made of steel and silk, a serene discipline that contrasted with the chronic stress that Santiago carried on his forehead. The first 10 seconds passed in silent panic. Santiago's breath caught in his throat, fearing that any movement would break the spell. This wasn't an exercise in brute strength, but a delicate dance of balance, where Nico's will seemed to trace a straight line in the unstable air. Mina spoke softly, words in soft Spanish, encouraging Nico's soul to stay upright, to defy gravity for one more instant. Every second that passed was an eternity of overcoming, and Santiago felt the moisture in his own eyes, an emotion that had long since been numbed by ambition. He observed the sweat on Nico's forehead, the slight trembling in his legs, the Herculean effort those 30 seconds represented in his son's life. They were 30 seconds stolen from fear, limitation, and all the pessimistic diagnoses that had filled the Valdez family's living rooms. Finally, he reached the finish line. Nico faltered, but before his body touched the ground, Mina stabilized him with the precision of a surgeon and the tenderness of a mother. The crutches returned to his little hands, but Nico's gaze toward Mina was one of pure adoration, a silent gratitude for having touched the ground with his own 2 feet. The spell was broken, but the memory of that miraculous moment remained seared into Santiago's retina with the force of lightning. He swallowed his schedule, his calls, and his stress, realizing that he had just witnessed something truly valuable in the universe. This wasn't just a physical exercise. It was a rebirth of hope that had begun without his knowledge, without his money, with only the dedication of a young girl. Santiago approached. His designer suit suddenly seemed ridiculous and heavy, and all he could murmur was an order to himself. He felt an irrepressible need to tear down the wall that separated him from that small victory, to understand the magic Mina held in her hands. The truth screamed in his silence. He had invested in everything except the one thing that truly mattered: time with his son. Nico's radiant smile, even tired, was a sun he hadn't seen rise in years, eclipsed by the shadow of his own absence. Mina stood, polite and reserved, waiting for some instruction, unaware that she had just changed her employer's orbit. The executive, known for his impatience and cold-blooded decisions, contemplated the 30 seconds that had redefined his concept of success. He took his phone out of his pocket and, with an unprecedented gesture, canceled his entire shift, rejecting the call from the corporate world. "I'll review these exercises tomorrow, without fail." Santiago canceled meetings, finally putting his presence where his heart was. Mina's day began before the sun kissed the Hollywood Hills, swapping the opulent silence of Pacific Palisades for the vibrant, constant bustle of Boyle Heights. Her life was a choreography of sacrifice, waking up in the dark, making coffee, dressing quickly in the simple, impeccable uniform that concealed her strength. The commute was long, punctuated by slow stops and the intense smells of the bus that took her from her Latin reality to the enclave of privilege. It was a pedestrian bridge, crossing invisible barriers of class and culture, always with the serene dignity of someone who knows the price of every minute. At home, her mother, exhausted from years of double work in a sewing factory, was preparing for another devastating journey. Her mother's exhaustion was Mina's driving force, the silent reminder that her success with Nico was not due only to the boy, but to the emergence of her own family. In the small apartment, her brother Carlos, 17, was already poring over his textbooks, balancing the weight of American history with the relief of a part-time shift. Carlos was the future, the first in his family with a real chance at higher education, and Mina was his dedicated, silent guardian. She knew that rehabilitation wasn't just a career. For her, it was a legacy learned on the dusty streets and makeshift clinics of Tlaquepaque, Jalisco. It was there, years ago, that she learned to heal pain with her hands and to hope with patience, while helping Carlos recover from a serious childhood accident. Mexico taught her not only the technique, but the philosophy of, if possible, the unshakable belief that the soul is the driving force of the body. The memory of Tlaquepaque and the image of his brother's determined face fueled him through the long hours of travel and work. He felt more at home on the bustling streets of East Los Angeles than in the cold perfection of Pacific Palisades, where money bought everything except human contact. This was his hometown, the community where every neighbor was family and every struggle was shared under the same warm sky and mariachi music. Stepping off the bus and walking to the door, Mina left his Boyle Heights armor behind and donned the superhero cape of Don Nico. He saw the job not just as a paycheck, but as a sacred rescue mission, a chance to prove that hope knows no zip code. His dedication was total, without reservation. He brought to the Valdez home not only his skills, but also his heart and the resilience of a people. He knew that if Nico took a step, it would be a step for his entire community, a symbol that strength lies in the soul and the will. Upon arriving at the house, the contrast was stark. The vast green of the garden seemed to swallow up her modesty and the battered backpack that carried her materials. But Nico's gaze, the glimmer of recognition and expectation in his eyes, erased any social or cultural differences. In that moment, they were just two warriors on a journey, one teaching his body to walk, the other teaching his soul to fly. Mina remembered the pain she felt watching Nico crawl and the silent promise she made to herself that first day. She knew Nico's rehabilitation would not be measured in months or dollars, but in the overflowing joy of each small achievement. Her method was based on connection, caring, and the belief that healing begins with a smile and a joyful soul. She knelt down, and Nico hugged her with the strength that only a child who struggles every day can generate. The reward of a presence that truly cares. The absence of her father, Santiago, was an open wound in the house, and Mina felt a responsibility to fill it with vitality and Latin warmth. She began her exercise routine, always mixing technical discipline with fun, transforming pain into a superhero game. For Nico, she wasn't just a therapist. She was his secret friend, the accomplice who made him believe his bones were made of vibranium. She knew that joy was a powerful painkiller and that a genuine smile was the first sign that the body was ready to cooperate with the mind. And there, in the Pacific Palisades garden, Mina Cruz, the girl from Boyle Heights, began to rewrite the destiny of a rich kid and her own family. Nico will smile every day, Mr. Valdez, and it's that smile that will make him walk. The promise was a fire lit in the darkness. That Monday, Santiago kept his promise, appearing in the kitchen before the virtual meetings an event so unusual that even Gabriella, his wife, raised her eyebrows in surprise. He felt uncomfortable in his own home, a stranger in what should have been a familiar environment, but the scent of pancakes guided him. Mena, with her usual discretion, prepared Nico's special breakfast, a ritual unfamiliar to Santiago. Hero Energy pancakes. The executive watched silently as Nico, his eyes sparkling with happiness, devoured the batter drizzled with maple syrup, telling Mena lively stories. His father's presence was a recurring theme, but Mena and Nico continued their bubble of joy, ignoring the tension and focusing on their morning ritual. Santiago realized that Nico not only loved the pancakes, but also their dedication, someone who remembered his small, crucial routines. In the garden, the therapy session began under the watchful, silent observation of his father, who tried to hide his anxiety with a cup of coffee. Mena wasn't intimidated by his boss's gaze. His attention was completely focused on Nico, on his breathing and the shape of his small body. He combined the precision of a medical manual with the passion of a teacher, adjusting the angle of a knee with the ease with which he told a joke. Mena's methodology was calm and technical, but deeply rooted in human connection, demonstrating that affection was the best auxiliary muscle. He used playful exercises, transforming stretches into secret missions and the floor into lava that could only be crossed with controlled steps. Santiago, the man of quick and brutal decisions, understood the complexity of patience and the art of waiting for a muscle fiber to awaken. He watched as Mena used her body weight to steady Nico, her voice a balm of confidence and firmness. She didn't give orders, but instead invited him to excel, with words of encouragement that seemed straight out of an ancient book of wisdom. Rehabilitation was as much a mental game as a physical one, and Mena was the supreme strategist, always one step ahead of Nico's frustration. He trusted her blindly, allowing her to manipulate his legs and guide him through movements that caused pain, but promised freedom. Santiago felt a pang of envy, not for the affection, but for the absolute trust his son placed in this young woman he'd known for only a few weeks. He, the father, was the source of money and privilege. She, the source of purpose and tangible hope for Nico. The emotion was palpable in the air, a mix of effort, sweat, and the silent promise of a limitless future that only faith can forge. Mena was a beacon, and Nico was the small boat that navigated rough seas, always returning to the safety of his harbor of support and dedication. Santiago, for his part, felt the shame of her absence like a physical weight, realizing he had delegated the most essential love and care. He wondered how much time those 30 seconds of freedom had required of Mena in terms of preparation, affection, and research. The price of presence, he realized at that moment, was far more expensive than the time on his executive agenda, demanding the surrender of his soul. The session concluded with the ritual of the warrior's touch, and a strong embrace that sealed the alliance and the unbreakable trust between them. As Mena, demure as ever, gathered her equipment, Gabriella emerged from the shadows of the house, observing the scene. Nico's mother's eyes filled with tears, a mixture of gratitude and deep sorrow for having allowed her son's life to become a business. She had witnessed Nico's miracle and Mena's dedication, and a deep mistrust stabbed her in the heart. That level of dedication was unusual, almost frightening, in a world driven by transactions and profits, and Gabriella was a woman accustomed to the cynicism of Beverly Hills. Nico's smile was proof of that, but maternal instinct set off an alarm. Who was this young woman who loved her son so fervently? Her silence spoke louder than any words, a tangle of conflicting emotions, relief, and unexpected jealousy. Gabriella watched silently from behind the window, her hands clasped over her chest, moved by her son's recovery, but deeply suspicious of other people's passion. The day's challenge was bold, a leap of faith proposed by Nico, who was now feeling the intoxicating taste of the small amount of freedom he had gained the day before. 30 seconds wasn't enough. The 5-year-old warrior wanted a full minute, wanted to prove that fear had been banished from his kingdom. Mina felt the weight of responsibility. Theminutes. It was a calculated risk, requiring twice as much concentration from both her and the boy. She prepared her body with deep stretches, preparing her muscles with the same care a violinist uses to tune their instrument before a concert. Her heart beat to Nico's accelerated rhythm, but his voice was a mantra of calm and power, demanding absolute confidence in his technique and in himself. Santiago watched, this time kneeling in the grass, his gaze fixed on his son's determination, feeling the tension in every stretched fiber. The clock started ticking. Mina stepped back, but kept her hands a foot away from Nico, ready for the rescue, with the stance of a boxer at the height of his concentration. Nico was focused, his teeth clenched in silent effort, his legs like glass that threatened to shatter at any moment. 15 seconds. The boy stumbled, but corrected himself with surprising speed, the muscle memory of his training kicking in real time. 20 seconds. Nico's face was red with exertion, but a stubborn smile danced on his lips, as if mocking the difficulty. 30 seconds. The previous mark passed with a stifled gasp of satisfaction, and Santiago's breath hitched with pure pride and terror. 40 seconds. Nico's body began to sag, his torso tilted dangerously forward, and the minute seemed like a distant dream. The effort reached its peak at the 50-second mark. Nico's right leg buckled, and his entire body began to fall like a tower of dominoes. The sound of the air slicing through his falling body was the only warning, and Mina's instincts reacted with lightning speed, without thinking, simply acting. He lunged forward, not to stop, but to break the fall, using his own body as a shock absorber, a precise and painful technique. Mina prevented Nico's head from hitting the cobblestone floor, absorbing the impact with his shoulder and arm, a quiet moan in his throat. It wasn't a hug, it was an emergency technical intervention, a maneuver. Know how it demonstrated years of experience and a deep connection. The world stopped for a moment, and Santiago ran, his heart pounding, fear painted on his face like a mask of horror. Nico was crying, but from frustration, not pain. His anger at not making it to the next minute was greater than the impact of the fall. Mina, despite the pain in her shoulder, immediately comforted him, assuring him that he was safe, with a calm and firm tone. She looked at Santiago, who was bursting with worry and gratitude, and shook her head, indicating there were no serious injuries. "I'm fine. Mr. Valdez." "Okay. Almost there. My warrior," she whispered, stroking Nico's hair with an almost maternal love. Relief flooded Santiago, dissipating his panic and leaving behind a debt of gratitude that money couldn't repay. He saw her sacrifice, the pain she swallowed to protect her son, and understood that Mina's presence was a shield, not just a service. The adrenaline subsided, and all Santiago felt was the desperate need to ensure that presence never left him. He approached Mina, pale, his voice hoarse, and gratitude washed over him like a wave. He needed more than just an hour a day. The thought of returning to his routine, of failing the next attempt, of not being around for the next fall or victory, was unbearable. He saw the small bruise on Mina's arm, the physical wear and tear of her heroism, and felt compelled to protect her as she had protected his son. The executive, who had always considered time a finite and expensive commodity, now wanted to completely buy Mina's time, warmth, and dedication. He looked at her serene strength, and understood that his son's future depended on that constant, dedicated presence. "I want to stay every morning, Mina, every workout, every minute, every fall." She was exposing her own fragility. Mina frowned. "You can do this, Mr. Valdez? Will you be here?" Mina's question struck Santiago like a lightning bolt, exposing the hypocrisy of his offer. He had requested her presence, but couldn't guarantee hers. That night, the silence in the house was thicker than usual, and Gabriela finally broke the barrier that had separated her from her husband for months. They met in the living room, not as lovers or companions, but as two exhausted survivors in a silent, cold interrogation room. Gabriella began to talk about the loneliness that had settled like a cold fog in their marriage, about the emptiness left by Santiago's emotional absence. She confessed that the pain of watching Nico struggle, coupled with her husband's coldness, had led her to consider separation, the definitive breakup of the family. Nico's struggle was a catalyst for the pain, but Santiago's distance was the slow poison that was killing the relationship, day by day. His voice was a pained whisper, speaking of the lonely nights, the medical decisions made without him, the feeling of being a single married mother. "I was alone on this island, Santiago, with Nico and fear, and you built your empire on our ruins," he said, his voice low. He spoke of his distrust of Mena, not because he thought she was evil, but because her level of dedication mirrored her father's neglect. This stranger's love seemed like a miracle, but also a threat, a painful reminder that the only thing missing was paternal affection. Gabriella felt they had failed Nico, not financially, but in the surrender of their souls, in a presence no money could buy. She was tired of being the only anchor on a slowly sinking ship, and status quo it was unbearable and painful. Santiago listened without interruption, head bowed, Gabriella's every word falling upon him like a just and deserved sentence. He admitted his absence, his flight to work as a cowardly defense mechanism, his inability to deal with his son's pain. "I wasn't building an empire, I was hiding," he confessed, his voice cracking with the belated and brutal realization of his failure. He understood that he had traded love for work, tact for compromise, and that the fear of failing as a father had caused him to fail completely. The confession was both a relief and a torment, the truth exposed in the cold room, the recognition that what had been broken was the foundation of their union. His heart ached for Gabriella's loneliness, for the silent struggle she had waged, and for the distance he himself had imposed between them. The conversation was the most sincere they'd had in years, and their shared vulnerability was a tenuous thread of hope in the darkness. They weren't talking about divorce, but about the slow death of a marriage, rescued at the last moment by Nico's crutch-free life. The family's future depended on a painful and slow rebuilding, a joint effort that required dedication from both of them. Gabriella looked at him not with anger, but with a silent plea. "Show me you still care. Show me our family is worth it." They realized that Mena had been the catalyst, the proof that dedication and unconditional love could reverse the impossible. From that moment on, Nico's fight would be everyone's fight, and Santiago and Gabriella's marriage would be rebuilt, brick by brick. Santiago raised his head, his eyes met Gabriella's, and the pain in his gaze was genuine, without corporate artifice. He understood that the only thing that mattered was his own presence, his time, and his unwavering commitment to his family. Apologies weren't enough. The time for words was over, and the moment for concrete actions had finally arrived, without delay. He didn't promise that work would disappear, but he did promise that family would be his priority, the center of his orbit, the sun in his universe. He embraced her in a desperate and sincere embrace, the touch of two strangers recognizing each other beneath the ruins. He swore that his family's story would not end in separation, but in redemption, led by the courage of a 5-year-old boy. He held her tighter, his forehead in her hair, and whispered, "I won't speak anymore. I'm going to give me the chance to prove it to you." He promised action, not empty words. Gabriella's friendship with Monica, a Brentwood socialite, was a relic of a distant past, based more on the state more than a real connection. Monica visited the Valdez home not with the intention of offering support, but to inspect the family's newest addition, Mena Cruz. The meeting took place poolside, under the relentless California sun, where cynicism and privilege were shamelessly on display. Monica, in one of her elitist and malicious remarks, began to humiliate Mina, questioning her about her lack of American certifications and the smell of poverty. She insinuated that Mina's salary was excessive for a nanny from East Los Angeles, and questioned whether she had a criminal record or was legal. Monica's venom was subtle but lethal, aimed at undermining Mina and, by extension, Gabriella's decision to trust her. Mina, standing next to Nico preparing a drink, listened silently, with impeccable posture and an imperturbable expression. The attack was nothing new to her. It was the background noise of the class superiority she encountered in almost every upper-class home. Her dignity was her armor, and she refused to stoop to the level of the offense, focusing solely on her mission with Nico. She was willing to swallow the humiliation, as she had so often, for the sake of her job and her family's future. However, the impact of Monica's cruelty fell not only on Mina, but also on Nico's small heart, a witness to the cruelty. The boy looked at Mina, at Monica's cold face, and a righteous anger ignited a spark of courage in his soul. Nico took a wobbly step toward Monica, his crutches beating the marble floor like a war drum, demanding attention. He stood between Mina and the socialite, acting like a small, protective lion. The fear of being ignored had been replaced by the need to defend his friend. "She's not a nanny. She's my best friend," Nico declared, his voice low but filled with an authority that surprised everyone in the room. "And you can't speak ill of Mina," he continued, his face flushed with indignation. The effort of speaking was greater than any physical exercise. The shock paralyzed Monica, who was used to being feared but not used to facing a 5-year-old with a huge heart. The scene was shocking. The boy, whose life depended on kindness, defending his guardian angel with the only weapon he possessed: the truth. Gabriella, who was about to intervene, felt a surge of pride and overwhelming shame for her friend as she realized how rotten this world was. Nico's act was the turning point, the line that demanded an immediate and irrevocable decision about loyalty and values. She looked at Monica, at the expression of disdain she couldn't hide, and felt repulsed by this empty friendship. The Valdez family was in the process of redefining itself, and the new foundations would be built on respect, not hate. State social. Gabriella, the socialite, remembered the loneliness she had confessed to Santiago and knew that Mina was the antidote to that superficial life. The sparkle in Nico's eyes, defending his friend, was more valuable than all the diamonds in Beverly Hills and all the gala dinners. She approached Monica with an icy calm that left no room for doubt, her voice authoritative and definitive. "Monica, Nico just taught you a lesson in loyalty and respect, something you clearly forgot along the way," Gabriella began with veiled contempt. She thanked Mina with a look that promised protection and looked at her friend with the pain of a final goodbye. "From today on, you will learn to respect anyone who enters my house, or you will never cross this door again," she concluded. The verdict sealed. Monica left silently, humiliated by the boy and rejected by her friend, leaving behind a trail of toxicity that dissipated into the air. The line of respect had been drawn, and Mina Cruz was firmly within the Valdez family's protective circle. Nico defended himself with all his might. "She's my best friend." Gabriella stood firm. "There will be respect here, or there will be no door for you." Nico's success did not go unnoticed in the circle of pediatric physical therapists and rehabilitation specialists in West Los Angeles. Mina's progress in 30 days surpassed months of work with expensive therapists, and word of mouth spread quickly. Arturo Dominguez, 48, Santiago's longtime rival, a Beverly Hills real estate developer and father of a child with cerebral palsy, was one such observer. Arturo was known for his cynicism and for treating people like tradable assets, buying and selling talent with the same cold-bloodedness with which he treated property. He was the opposite of Santiago, a man who understood the value of presence, but used it to manipulate and dominate, never to love. Arturo obtained Mina's number through an inside source and scheduled a meeting with the clear intention of launching a market attack. The meeting took place in an elegant cafe, a place Mina didn't frequent often, and Arturo got straight to the point without beating around the bush or hypocrisy. "Mina, let's not waste any time. What you're doing with Valdez is impressive, and my grandson, little Gail, needs you," he declared with a cold smile. He praised his technique, his energy, and his bond with Nico, but he treated him like a product, something quantifiable and therefore purchasable. The offer was exorbitant, double his salary, premium health insurance that would cover Mina's entire family, and incredible retirement benefits. Arturo offered him a way out of poverty, the chance to retire his mother and secure his brother's college education without further sacrifice. It was an indecent and tempting proposal, a blank check that would change his family's destiny with the signing of a contract. Mina's heart pounded, a mixture of excitement and guilt at the most difficult financial dilemma she had ever faced. The money would solve all her immediate problems, pay for Carlos's college tuition, ensure her mother's health, and escape the harsh reality of Boyle Heights. She thought of her mother, exhausted after years of standing on her feet, and the temptation to accept the offer and give her a better life was almost irresistible. However, she thought of Nico, of the strength of his embrace, of the promise that he would smile every day, and the emotional bond drew her back. Arturo's dedication was selfish, that of a man who buys results, while Santiago's now seemed to be moving toward honesty. She realized that Arturo was buying her talent. Santiago, on the other hand, was beginning to value her essence and purpose. The weight of loyalty to Nico, Gabriela, and the new Santiago was immense, but the weight of family responsibility was even greater and more urgent. "I need to think, Mr. Dominguez, it's not just about the money. It's about the bond I have with the Valdez family," he said in a surprisingly firm voice. Arturo laughed, his tone dry and cynical. "Bonuses are for poor people, Mena. Wealth is loyalty to your own future. Valdez would never give you what I give." He increased the pressure, painting a future of luxury and comfort, contrasting it with the long hours and bus rides she faced. Mina knew he was right about the money, but the idea of abandoning Nico on the verge of his big win made her feel like a traitor. She stood, thanked him for the offer, and promised a response within 48 hours, shouldering the weight of a moral and financial dilemma. The dilemma was agonizing. The money would change his family's life, versus the unbreakable bond she'd created with Nico. She was caught between necessity and purpose, between her humble past and the prosperous future Arturo was offering her on a silver platter. The choice wasn't between one boss and another, but between the security of her family and loyalty to a boy she loved like a little brother. She knew if she accepted, she'd have a life of luxury, but the price would be the loss of her soul, the sacrifice of her deepest purpose. The bus ride home had never been longer. The East LA landscape suddenly seemed harsher and more urgent in its need. Mina's decision was more than a job choice. It was the definition of her own identity and what she valued above all else. Arturo doubled the offer as he left, whispering, "Think of your mother, Mina. Think of your brother. Whatever Valdez can offer, I'll double it." Santiago, informed by Gabriela about Monica's behavior and Mina's growing bond with Nico, understood that the time had come to act. Arturo's threat wasn't just a market risk. It was a test of character, proof that he should value Mina with dignity and respect. He called a formal meeting, not in the office, but in his home library, treating Mina not as an employee, but as a strategic partner. Mina arrived tense, still weighing Arturo's offer, and Santiago began to talk, not about money, but about the intrinsic value of her work. "Mina, what you do for Nico is priceless. It's a purpose. It's love. And I'm not going to compete with dirty money," he said, surprising her. He wanted to formalize their bond, give her the title and respect her work deserved, elevating her far beyond the status of partner. Santiago formalized Mina's status as Nico's therapeutic companion, a title that granted her authority and professional recognition. But he went further, investing in her future and her family's dreams, a gesture that Arturo, with his coldness, would never consider. He offered to pay for her entire physical therapy course at Cal State LA, ensuring that she could study during the night shift. To minimize her sacrifice, he hired another person to do the housework, allowing her to dedicate herself exclusively to Nico and his studies. The benefits for her family increased, including a living wage for her mother, who would no longer have to exhaust herself at the factory. Santiago's proposal was an investment in Mina, a recognition that her value was more than her time. Mina listened in shock, feeling the lump in her throat loosen as she realized Santiago had seen beyond the resume and the Latin accent. He was offering her dignity, not handouts. He was buying her future, not just the present, something Arturo couldn't understand. "Your family, Mina. And we support family, not buy," Santiago said with an honesty she never expected from a man of his caliber. Emotion flooded her. The promise of a better life for her mother and Carlos, the chance to become a certified and respected professional. She was about to accept, her heart brimming with gratitude and relief, when Santiago's phone rang, a cruel interruption. It was Arturo Dominguez executing his final move, a desperate maneuver to snatch Mina from his rival's clutches. Santiago put the phone on speakerphone, allowing Mina to hear the real estate mogul's final letter, the final assault on her loyalty. Arturo, in a tone that brooked no refusal, doubled Santiago's salary offer, adding a new car and fully comprehensive life insurance. The sum was exorbitant, a sum that exceeded anything Mina and her family could dream of earning in 10 years of honest work. It was proof that Arturo saw her only as an asset, a trophy to steal from his rival, a price to pay to satisfy his vanity. Mina looked at Santiago, the sincerity in his eyes, and the proposal that wasn't about money but about mutual trust. The dilemma returned, stronger and more seductive: instant wealth versus the slow construction of a dignified and purposeful future. Arturo reaffirmed his offer in a cold and calculating voice over the loudspeaker, offering a car and comprehensive insurance. Mina's fate was sealed between two worlds. Mina felt the weight of Arturo's offer. The lure of money was palpable, but Santiago's steady gaze and support were a refuge. She saw the fear in Santiago's eyes, not of losing the money, but of losing the hope Mina represented for Nico and his family. The girl from Boyle Heights took a deep breath, remembering her mother's dignity and Carlos's quiet ambition, and the decision became clearer. Santiago, reading the dilemma on her face, knew he needed to go beyond money. He needed to match the promise of security and a future. He didn't just want to buy Mina's loyalty, he wanted to earn her support, showing that his values matched hers. He looked into her eyes and said, "Arturo offers riches, Mina. I offer roots and wings. What more do you need?" Mina confided her fears about college. The weather, the commute from East Los Angeles to Cal State LA, the difficulty of balancing her studies with her full-time job. Santiago listened attentively without judgment and assured her that the schedule would be flexible, that the driver would be at her disposal, and that her study time would be sacred. He promised tutors, psychological support, and everything necessary to keep her from giving up on her dream of becoming a certified physical therapist. Then he matched Arturo's offer, not only with salary, but also with comprehensive health insurance for her mother and Carlos. "It's an investment in your family, Mina, because you're investing in ours," he said, sealing the deal with a dignity that money couldn't buy. Santiago's proposal was more than an offer. It was a partnership, a mutual recognition that they were partners on Nico's journey. Relief flooded Mina like a warm wave, the certainty of having chosen the most difficult path, but the most just and meaningful. She thought of Nico, of his first step, of his laughter, and knew that the joy she felt with him was worth more than Arturo's luxury. "I'm staying, Mr. Valdez." "I'm staying with Nico," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. The weight of family responsibility finally lifted. The handshake that followed wasn't between employee and employer, but between two human beings who respected each other and shared a greater purpose. Santiago felt a tear run down his face, the relief of having saved not only Mina, but the very soul of his family and its redemption. His choice of Mina wasn't based on financial security, but on emotional loyalty and faith in the transformation she was leading. Nico was in the hallway, hidden, listening to the entire conversation, his heart pounding, gripped by both uncertainty and hope. He had understood the threat of losing his friend, the idea that money could steal the person who made him feel like a superhero. Mina's "I'm staying" was like a cry of victory in his little universe, confirmation that their friendship was stronger than any marriage proposal. The boy crawled to the door and let out a cry of joy that sounded almost like a roar, the purest and most unbridled happiness. He hugged Mina with the strength of a small gladiator, thanking her for staying and for choosing him above all else. That intimate moment, Nico's cry of joy, was the true price paid and the ultimate reward for Mina's decision. The Valdez family rallied around Mina and Nico. The pain of the past had been replaced by the promise of a future of cooperation and affection. Gabriela, watching from afar, smiled as she realized that the mistrust had disappeared, replaced by deep gratitude and mutual respect. Mina's presence had healed Nico, but it was also healing the deep rift that had formed in the Valdez marriage. She understood that the power of purpose was the glue that bound them all together, transforming wealth into a tool of goodness, not corruption. From that moment on, the story was no longer about money, but about humanity, about the decision to be true to her heart. Mina's yes wasn't just a professional decision. It was an act of love that changed the fate of 3 families. Nico heard it, almost shouting with joy, knowing his best friend had chosen him and his first step, the roar of a little warrior. Mina's dedication, now bolstered by Santiago's support and resources, reached a new level of intensity and hope. She worked with Nico with the focus of a scientist and the passion of an artist, fine-tuning the exercises and celebrating each small step forward. The preparation ritual was stronger, the belief in Nico's ability was unwavering, and the boy felt the positive energy surrounding him. The morning was clear and the garden was quiet as Mina positioned Nico, his crutches just out of reach, his gaze determined. The goal was no longer 30 seconds or a minute, but the journey to a small stone dragon statue, the warrior's goal. Nico was nervous, but Mina's hand was in the air, a silent reminder that she would be his safety net for any fall. The first step was hesitant, a small miracle of balance and will, the ground giving way under the weight of a body learning to defy gravity. The second step was firmer, followed by the third. Nico's concentration was absolute, his focus on the stone dragon his only compass. Santiago and Gabriela watched from afar, holding hands, their breaths caught in their throats, fearing the spell would be broken at any moment. Nico continued, his body staggering but his soul unwavering, each step a new victory over the pain and uncertainty of the past. 4 steps, and he was almost there. The last step seemed impossible, his energy fading, his body on the verge of surrendering to exhaustion. But Mina shouted words of encouragement in Spanish, a roar of strength, and Nico let out a silent cry of effort, taking the 5th step. He reached the dragon statue, embracing it with the strength of a small hero who had defeated his greatest enemy. Nico had taken 5 full steps, without support, without falling, without hesitation, and the garden erupted in a pure, unbridled cry of victory. Santiago and Gabriela ran to hug their son and Mina, tears streaming down their faces, proof that faith can move mountains. That moment was the turning point, the first step of no return, the promise that Nico's future would be one of freedom and movement. Nico, his face soaked with sweat and tears, looked at Mina and invented a ritual. "Guerrero!" he shouted, beating his chest with his hands. There was born the ritual of warrior, the victory cry that sealed the alliance and overcoming, a symbol of strength and resilience. Santiago, phone in hand, filmed the moment, emotion making it impossible for him to speak, simply capturing the purity of triumph. The video was shared only with his inner circle, but soon spread to Nico's school, going viral among elite parents in West Los Angeles. The video showed not only the step, but also Mina's dedication, Nico's beaming face, and the raw emotion of a family striving and triumphing. The school's parents, accustomed to competing in wealth, now competed in hope, yearning for the same magic that had touched the Valdez's lives. They wanted the formula, the technique, the secret of that girl from East Los Angeles who could perform miracles where experts had failed. Unbeknownst to her, Mina's door to fame was opening, and the story of Nico and her Guerrero was becoming a myth. Santiago's phone rang non-stop. His parents asked for Mina's contact information, hoping he would influence their children's lives. He felt immense pride for Nico and Mina, understanding that the greatest wealth wasn't money, but the ability to inspire others. Santiago, the executive, saw a business opportunity, but the man, the father, saw an opportunity to contribute to the community and a social purpose. He knew Mina couldn't influence everyone's lives, but that her story could be the catalyst for greater change in the community. Mina's search was a search for hope, proof that dedication and love could overcome any social or financial barrier. The Valdez family was at the center of a hurricane of positive emotions, leading the way the elite viewed overcoming adversity. The video of Nico performing the 5 steps went viral at school. Santiago's phone rang non-stop. All the parents wanted Mina's contact information and the magic formula. Nico's preschool end-of-year performance was a huge social event, a stage where Los Angeles's elite showcased their children. Nico was nervous. The idea of crossing the large stage without crutches in front of hundreds of people was a bigger challenge than any exercise. He had practiced the route for days in the garden, but the pressure of the audience and the immensity of the Westwood stage were a real threat to his confidence. Mina, in behind the scenes, stood beside him with a calming and encouraging whisper in his ear, reminding him that he was a warrior, a guerrero. He dressed him in the hero's costume from the play, with his cloak fluttering in the breeze and his red cape, a symbol of his newfound courage. Nico's mother, Gabriela, was in the front row, her heart racing, fearing that emotion or nervousness would make her son fall in front of everyone. The music started, the children took the stage, and Nico, at the center of attention, looked out at the audience, his vision clouded with anxiety. He hesitated. The first step seemed impossible. The memory of all his previous struggles returned forcefully, paralyzing him. Mina, from a distance, signaled. Guerrero Nico took a deep breath, remembering his promise that he could overcome himself. He let go of a friend's hand, rejected the assistance, and began to walk slowly across the stage, each step a declaration of independence and strength. The audience was silent, excitement in the air, the anticipation of a miracle happening before everyone's eyes. Nico crossed the stage with a wild smile on his face, the superhero suit seeming to fit perfectly on his small, victorious body. The applause was timid at first, but soon turned into a standing ovation, with parents and teachers rising, shocked and moved by the achievement. Nico reached the center of the stage, looked at the audience, and instead of taking a bow, pointed at, behind the scenes, calling out to her friend. "Mina! Mina Cruz!" she shouted loud and clear, demanding that the audience recognize the true heroine of her journey. Mina hesitated. Humility prevented her from exposing herself, but Nico's call was a command she couldn't ignore, a call to her heart. She stepped onto the stage, embarrassed but proud, and Nico pulled her to the center, raising his hand in a gesture of triumph. He didn't want the credit for himself. He wanted to share the victory with the one who had sacrificed himself for his freedom. The Westwood stage, usually reserved for showcasing wealth and talent, became a temple of gratitude and humility. Santiago, from the front row, stood and took the director's microphone, his gaze fixed on Mina and Nico, overcome with emotion. He didn't speak of money or success, but of the power of dedication and the importance of to be the bridge in someone's life. He spoke of how Mina had healed Nico, but also his family, and taught him the true meaning of being a father. "Mina is not an employee. She is the strength, the light, and the hope of our family," he declared, his voice cracking with pride and love. The ensuing ovation was deafening, not only for Nico, but also for Mina, the girl from East Los Angeles who had captured the hearts of the elite. The emotion was universal. Tears streaming down everyone's faces, a recognition that true wealth lies in presence and affection. Nico and Mina's story was a modern-day fairy tale, proof that love and dedication can transcend any social barrier. Mina, with tears in her eyes, felt the weight of her journey, the ultimate reward for her sacrifice, the validation of her purpose. The Westwood stage was the symbol of her rise, her victory over poverty and prejudice, a beacon of hope. She had become Nico's heroine, Santiago's inspiration, and proof that humility and kindness are the most powerful forces in the world. Nico's smile and Santiago and Gabriella's embrace were her true reward, the family she had helped rebuild. Santiago declared into the microphone in front of the entire audience, "Mina is family." A standing ovation for the little girl from East Los Angeles and her little warrior. Nico's success on the Westwood stage and Santiago's moving speech sparked new hope in the executive. He understood that his fortune and entrepreneurial talent could be used for something more meaningful than simply accumulating wealth. He knew Mina's power was unique, but the rehabilitation model based on caring and purpose could be replicated and expanded. Santiago began dedicating a significant portion of his fortune to creating a social branch, a center that would offer the same hope to other families. The planning was intense, combining Santiago's corporate rigor with Mina's humane and caring philosophy. Thus was born the Luce and Hope Children's Center, a beacon of hope and rehabilitation strategically located in the heart of East Los Angeles, near Mina's home. The center's creation was a choreography of overcoming obstacles. Mina studied at Cal State LA at night and interned full-time at the clinic during the day. She used her academic knowledge to perfect her technique and her practical experience to refine her rehabilitation philosophy. Santiago, in turn, used his connections and influence to secure funding, cutting-edge equipment, and an elite medical team. The center was a combination of high technology and human warmth, a place where hope was not a luxury, but a promise within reach of all. Mina was the rehabilitation director, the driving force and heart of the center, infusing her rehabilitation philosophy into every corner. If possible, Nico, the boy who had taken his first steps in kindergarten, became the unofficial ambassador of Luce and Hope, the face of overcoming challenges. The story of Nico and Mina, the bridge between Pacific Palisades and Boyle Heights, was the driving force behind the marketing and proof that purpose trumps prejudice. The center offered free rehabilitation to disadvantaged children with physical disabilities, focusing on love, presence, and personal growth. The work was exhausting, but Mina's satisfaction was endless. He was giving back to his community for the support he had received in the past. The children's smiles, small steps, and stories of overcoming obstacles were his reward, proof that he was on the right path. Santiago, in turn, felt the joy of true philanthropy, transforming his life from a cold executive to a man of purpose. He had found in Mina a partner, a friend, and a life teacher, the inspiration to use his wealth for the common good. The Luz y Esperanza Children's Center was the embodiment of the belief that hope can be born where money can't reach. The opening ceremony was simple but moving, attended by Santiago, Gabriella, Nico, and Mina's entire family. It was a moment of celebration, proof that presence and respect transform lives and build unbreakable bridges. Mina, the director, spoke about the importance of being the light in someone's life and the hope that comes from dedication and love. The center was a legacy, proof that Nico and Mina's story was only the beginning of a social and human revolution. The future looked promising, and their hard work was rewarded with the joy of seeing their dream come true. In the midst of the celebration, an elegant black car discreetly stopped across the street, catching Santiago's attention. Arturo Dominguez, the cynical rival, got out of the car, dressed in an expensive suit, but with an expression of humility and exhaustion. Accompanying him was a child, his grandson Gale, the same one he had tried to buy Mina with an indecent proposal. Arturo didn't approach. He simply watched from afar, seeing the children's joy, Mina's determination, and Santiago's pride. The tycoon witnessed what money can't buy: genuine affection and a community cemented by love. He was a stranger in his own game, aware that his grandson's life required more than riches and surgeries. Arturo Dominguez, the rival, arrived discreetly with his grandson, Gale, watching the light and hope celebration from afar. The cynicism of a broken man. Months passed after Luce and Hope opened, and the rehabilitation center became a success, a beacon of inclusion and hope. Arturo's grandson, Gale, began attending the center regularly, cared for by his nanny but remotely supervised by his grandfather. Arturo, the tireless entrepreneur, observed his grandson's progress, Gael's smile, and the tireless dedication of Mina and the staff. He saw Gael's transformation, which was not only physical but emotional, how the boy found friends and overcame fear in a safe environment. Arturo's cynicism was slowly eroded by the warmth of Luce and Hope, by the proof that life was more than financial transactions. He realized he had invested in everything but the one thing that mattered: human contact, purpose, and community. Gael's rehabilitation progressed rapidly under Mina's guidance, and the boy found in Nico a friend and mentor, a little warrior. The bond between the two, from different worlds but united by the same struggle, was living proof of light and hope's success. Arturo, who had tried to rob Mina, was now a silent and grateful customer, a witness to the miracle he had tried to buy. He felt the shame of his indecent advances, the contempt he had shown Mina, and the arrogance of his ego. Pride, his greatest armor, began to give way, and the need to apologize and acknowledge his mistake was urgent and inevitable. Santiago's rival was becoming a humble man, moved by the kindness and determination he had tried to belittle. Arturo called Santiago, not to discuss business or compete, but to apologize for his arrogance and coldness. "Santiago, I apologize. I tried to buy Mina because I only saw in her an exceptional talent, an asset to be exploited," he began, his voice hoarse. He confessed that all he valued was money and that he had lost his humanity in the relentless pursuit of more wealth. "I didn't see a purpose. I saw profit. And you and Mina taught me the only thing I needed to know: the value of presence," he said, overcome with emotion. The executive, who had always been cold and calculating, was exposing himself, his armor cracked by honesty and the pain of his mistake. He thanked Santiago for preventing him from taking Mina and for creating the center that was healing his grandson, Gale. Santiago listened silently. The victory over his rival now seemed small and insignificant compared to Arturo's humility. He understood that the success of Light and Hope wasn't just about the children, but about the transformation of adult souls, including his own. Nico's pain and suffering had become a catalyst for change, a beacon that healed the cold, distant elite. "Arturo, we thank you for giving us the opportunity to show you what purpose is," Santiago responded in the tone of a friend, not a rival. The conversation marked a milestone, proof that loyalty and affection triumphed over the competition and cynicism of the corporate world. The rivalry was over, replaced by mutual respect and an alliance for the common good, the future of the children. Arturo's gesture, his apology, was proof that Lucent Hope was fulfilling its mission, transforming the lives of families both in need and wealthy. He promised to make a significant anonymous donation to the center, an act of giving back and acknowledging the value of its purpose. The businessman had become a philanthropist, inspired by the kindness and dedication of Mina Cruz, the woman from East Los Angeles. Mina, upon learning what had happened, felt a profound satisfaction. Not only had she healed Nico, but she had also softened the heart of a tycoon. The story was a cycle of redemption and hope, proof that presence and love transform people into bridges of goodness. That moment sealed the truth that wealth without purpose is poverty in disguise, and love without judgment is true fortune. I only saw talent and priceless courage, Santiago. You saw family and purpose. The opponent apologized and thanked him. The morning sun was shining again on the Pacific Palisades garden, but now the atmosphere was one of peace, purpose, and genuine happiness. Santiago and Nico sat on the grass, watching a group of light and hope children play, a luxury the executive shared. Nico, now stronger and more confident, ran with the other children. His crutches had become an occasional accessory, no longer a prison. He was the ambassador, the little warrior who inspired everyone, and the garden was the sanctuary where hope had been born and grown. Santiago looked at Nico, his joy unbridled, and realized how far they had come since the day he saw him without crutches. The price of presence, he realized, was the total surrender of one's soul, but the reward was a peace and purpose that money could never buy. The father hugged his son. The warmth of his touch was the ultimate proof of his transformation, his absence of pain, and his return to humanity. "Dad, do you think every family will find a Mina?" Nico asked with the naivete of a child who believes in universal goodness. Santiago smiled. The question struck a chord in his heart, reminding him of the rarity and value of pure, unconditional dedication. He looked at Mina, who was helping a baby girl take her first steps, the embodiment of hope, the bridge between worlds. He knew Mina was unique, a miracle of kindness and talent he had been fortunate enough to find and wise enough to appreciate. "Not every family finds a Mina, my warrior, but every one can become a Mina for someone in need," he replied, his voice full of conviction. The phrase echoed in the air. The mantra of the Valdez family's new philosophy, to be the bridge, the light, and the hope in the lives of those in need. Luz y Esperanza was the embodiment of this belief, proof that wealth could be used to build bridges, not walls of separation. They were giving back to the community what they had received, a chance at redemption, a purpose, and unconditional devoted love. Mina, the immigrant from East Los Angeles, had taught the Pacific Palisades elite the true meaning of being a family and having a higher purpose. History was a cycle of give and receive, where pain was transformed into strength and absence into a total and dedicated presence. Nico and Mina's legacy proved that overcoming adversity begins with a leap of faith and a heart filled with kindness. At that moment, a moving scene unfolded on the lawn. A little girl who had arrived at the center fearfully was taking her first steps alone. Her mother's cry of joy echoed through the garden, the sound of victory, proof that Nico's miracle was being replicated and expanded. Mina ran to hug the girl and her mother, her eyes filled with emotion, the satisfaction of seeing hope blossom in other families. That moment was the ultimate reward, proof that her journey was worth it, the certainty of having found her place in the world. Santiago smiled as he realized that life was more than business and money. It was about the ability to be the light in someone's darkness. The vision of a world where every family was a Mina to someone was his new dream, his new goal in life. Santiago's phone rang. It was an executive from a major healthcare network calling to invite him to expand the Luz y Esperanza model. They wanted to open a second center in another city, replicating the rehabilitation model based on affection and purpose. Nico and Mina's story was becoming a movement, a silent revolution that was changing the way healthcare was viewed. Santiago looked at Nico, at the hope-filled garden, and accepted the invitation, aware that his purpose had become his legacy. The future was promising, the work was hard, but the joy of being a bridge and a light in the lives of other families was his greatest reward. The story of light and hope would continue, and the world would be a better place thanks to the dedication of a girl from East Los Angeles and a warrior boy. A boy takes his first steps alone on the grass. Santiago receives an invitation to open a second Luz and Hope location in another city. The day of the intimate ceremony was serene, with the California sun bathing the Pacific Palisades garden in a warm golden light. It wasn't a social event, but a celebration of gratitude and new beginnings, the end of one cycle and the beginning of another. The Valdez family was gathered, Santiago, Gabriela, and Nico, their eyes shining with happiness, the boy's face unspoiled by pain. Mina was there, not as an employee, but as an honored guest. The embodiment of the hope and love that had transformed their lives. Mina's mother and brother were present, in the garden for the first time, witnessing their daughter and sister's rise, the reward for their sacrifice. It was the union of two worlds, proof that the bridge between Pacific Palisades and Boyle Heights had been built on a foundation of respect and affection. The center of the garden was decorated with simple flowers, and the soft music allowed the voices and laughter of the center's children to be the main sound. The children of Luz y Esperanza were present, living proof of the project's success, and the future Mina and Santiago had built together. Santiago spoke briefly, his voice cracking with emotion, about the importance of presence and affection in a child's life. He thanked Mina for saving his son and his family, and for teaching him the true meaning of being a man with purpose. Gabriela, with tears in her eyes, hugged Mina, the final act of recognition and gratitude for the woman who had brought peace back to their home. Nico, the warrior, remained in the center smiling, proof that love and dedication are the greatest strengths of human nature. Mina spoke about the importance of being the light in someone's life, and the hope that is born from dedication and unconditional love. She spoke of the importance of honoring one's roots, building bridges, and using talent for good, not just for personal gain. Her speech was a testament to gratitude and humility, proof that true wealth lies in the ability to influence the lives of others. The ceremony concluded with a toast to the life, purpose, and future of light and hope, Nico and Mina's legacy. The garden, once a place of pain and absence, was now a sanctuary of hope and new beginnings, a symbol of redemption. The Valdez and Cruz families were united, proof that love and respect transform people into bridges of goodness. Nico handed Mina a small medal of Guerrero, a symbol of their friendship and the victory they had achieved together. Mina, the immigrant, the professional, the friend, was at the center of her own success story, an inspiration to all. The future was promising with the expansion of Luz and Hope, the growth of the Valdez family, and Mina's academic success. The story was a cycle of redemption, proof that presence and purpose are the greatest gifts we can give someone. Where money and state, after the failure, the love and dedication of a simple young woman prevailed, rewriting the destiny of a powerful family. The final message was clear. Strength lies in the soul, and in the will to be a bridge in the lives of those in need of hope. Presence, respect, and love transform people into bridges. Don't hide in your absence. Be someone's Mina today. Comment where you're watching from and who your Mina was or will be. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to see more stories that inspire and transform lives.